Hello, my name is Allen Stevenson III, and by day I'm a specialist trainer at DreamWorks, and in the nights I am a digital creator that works quite heavily in the augmented reality space. I got into Cinema 4D back in 2015. I had a background in 2D motion graphics, but I wanted to get into 3D. I really wanted a friendly and powerful tool, and so I did some research, found out Cinema 4D was the right path for me. And today I mostly use Cinema 4D to model, rig, and animate things like this. So I'm going to show you briefly my portfolio or my reel, and just to give you an idea of what kind of work I do. Here is my portfolio, and I'll show that now. Alright, so that's a little bit of the kind of work that I do. Little history about me is I'm mostly self-taught with the 3D stuff. It really started, from watching lots of YouTube videos and lots of stuff like videocopilot.net, Grayscale Gorilla, EJ iDesign, Beeple, following artists like that and just seeing video tutorials online, and then just tons of experimentation. I will practice stuff day and night, and eventually, with a lot of iterations, I like to fail quickly and often, and then the result is I get something that's pretty good with time. Currently work with lots of really cool clients. So I work with like Snapchat, I work with Adobe, I work with Facebook and Instagram, and then a lot of folks in the music industry, a lot of influencers that need visual works and effects. So I like to kind of keep a diversified portfolio. I'm a huge nerd. I like to think of myself as a nerdfluencer, try to influence nerds. So if you're a nerd, we're gonna vibe. We're gonna definitely vibe together. So today I want to show you a little bit of my nerd flow, how to make some cool stuff work for augmented reality, and let's get right to it. Welcome back. So today what I'm going to show you is how I use Cinema 4D to make assets ready for augmented reality. I call this my Cinema 4D to augmented reality pipeline. And we'll be making a UFO structure like this, and I'm going to talk to you about modeling principles, texturing, UV maps, as well as animation that works really well inside of augmented reality. So let's get started. I'm going to start off with a brand new Cinema 4D file here, and I'm going to switch my layout to standard. And so here we are inside of Cinema 4D. For our UFO, I'm going to start off to the objects, and let's start off with a torus. For my workflow, I like to display my lines. It's really important to get an idea of how many polygons we're working with. So I'm going to go to my torus options here and expand things up, go to our object, and I want to reduce the amount of ring segments, something like 16, and I'm also going to reduce the pipe segments to something like that. Just trying to see somewhere that looks comfortable. Then I'm going to use my scale tool to kind of scale down this torus. So I'm going to go to our coordinates here, and I'm going to squash it down in the y-axis. And this already creates a lot of the structure that we want for our UFO. Pretty cool, right? While we're at it, I'm going to go to our torus and maybe add some more adjustments, maybe increase the ring segments. I like to use decimals, multiples of 8 and 4 and 2. So we're going to go to 32 here is fine. And maybe I'll do a 48 for the pipe radius. Just to keep things nice and rounded. And then pipe segments, I have it as 9. I might do, let's see, 6 looks pretty good. Yeah, looks pretty good. Maybe up that a little bit. I'll go 12. Cool. All right, so that's our first shape. That's like our main disk. Now I'm gonna add the glass ball on the top. So we'll go to our objects, grab a sphere, and same idea, we're gonna just grab this manipulator and kind of create that glass top that we want for our UFO object. And I like to go to the sphere and play with the number of segments as well. So I might want it to be a little bit more rounded. So let's go around 24 segments here. Yeah, that feels good. And what I'd like to do next is convert this down to be objects. So by making it editable, I can go to a front view here and make that our full screen view. And then I can take like a rectangle selection and just grab all these bottom faces on our polygon. So I go to our face selection, just grab all the bottom faces here and delete them. Maybe I'm going to delete all the ones all the way up till about here. If I can grab all of them there. There we go. Great. And go back to our view and just make sure that our bottom is cut out. Great. That works for me. Cool. So we got our, our two main shapes. I like to start labeling things now. So we'll call this glass and I'll call this ship body. Next, we're going to use the cloner tool inside of Cinema 4D to make some really nice lights. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start off and make another sphere. And with this sphere, I'm going to grab our scale tool and bring it down a lot. I want to show you what it is. It's about this big right now. We're going to go to the sphere options, coordinates, and squash it down. So it's kind of like a pancake, a little bit of a squat kind of shape. And we're going to use a lot of these. So I'm going to reduce the number of segments a lot. So something like 8 might be totally fine for how small these are going to be. Then I'm going to go to the options up the top for MoGraph and go to our cloner tool and drag this sphere as a child of the cloner. And now we get a grid of these. And the reason why they're a grid, if you select the cloner, you'll see that we have the mode set to grid array, which is the default. I'm going to switch the mode to radial. And you don't see it because it's hiding inside, but now we have a radial clone, which means we can increase the count and increase the radius, and we have this nice way of cloning lights right onto our object. Now, if you don't like to kind of place things this way, we can also go to our cloner and switch it from radial. We can go to object, and now we don't see anything, and that's because we have to give it an object that we want to clone our lights to. So I can grab the ship body here and drag this as the object to be instanced on. And this creates some kind of random array of your objects on here. And you can change the way it's distributed down here. So I can go to the surface, maybe turn this to edge. That looks cool, but not what I'm going for today. We can go to vertex. It's a little bit closer, but not perfect. You just got some options. You can do axis or something. What I'm going to do though is stick with my object going to a radial look, and then with that root object, the parent object, where is it? Yeah, I'm just going to make sure that this one's scaled nicely. Now, if you don't see it modifying and like turning into that flatter shape, sometimes what we have to do is convert that to an editable object. And then we can start to play with the scale in the cloner. So I can just scale it down here and then bring these lights on the top there. That feels pretty good. And then I might change the number of clones. So I'll go to our object here and reduce the count. I kind of like this 5 setup. Awesome. Then I'm going to save my work. So just, Control S. I'm going to call this UFO for AR and save it. Excellent. Cool. Now let's keep adding details because we're just having some fun. So we can also make 2 sets of clones. So I can clone 2 sets of spheres. What I might do is grab that clone, Control C it, Control V it. Now we have a copy. And I can move these copies down below to have some lights on the bottom of our UFO device. And for these ones, I might change some things. So we'll go to that cloner count, maybe increase it a bit, play with the radius, gonna go with that. Looks pretty good. And go to our coordinates if you want to squash it up or down. So I'm just gonna make it a little bit like that, and then just dip it back into the geometry so it's mostly hiding. Now, one thing to note for augmented reality is you can't keep all of these modifiers. You have to just bake out geometry at the end. So once you're happy with the way it's looking, it's a good idea to just right-click on those modifiers and make them editable objects. This copies it as geometry and breaks it all out. But for now, I'm just going to delete that clone because I don't need it. And then we'll do the same thing with this one. I'll just right-click on here and go to current state to object. And then by doing that, we are just freeing ourselves up from these modifiers and giving us plain geometry of these spheres. Next thing I want to do is maybe group these even more. So I grab the null object and go down and choose, I like to grab all the objects underneath the null, right-click and choose connect objects plus delete, which makes it one object, and I can then remove it out of that null and get rid of it. And then we'll do the same thing here. I'm going to grab all these spheres, right click, and go into connect objects and delete. Cool. So we got some lights, and I'll name these ones. So these ones are our top lights. These ones are our bottom lights. We have our glass and we have our ship body. It's always good to stay organized when you're working in this space. Next, I'm going to add some more objects down below. So we're going to go to our objects, and I'm going to add a tube. And with the tube, we're just going to move it down here and bring this down a little bit. Looks kind of like a mushroom right now. I'm just going to squash this out. Let's see, where is the tube outer ring? There it is. So I'm just going to bring that in. We got these three different rings for height. This is for the width of that tube. And just, doing stuff like this kind of just makes it a little bit more fun to add some cool effects to later. Great. Again, I'm just saving my work as we go. We got our cube here. Now, one thing I want to point out is when you're working in augmented reality, you want to make sure that you keep your polygon count pretty low. A good rule of thumb is no object that you have should be over 10,000 polygons. And to check that in Cinema 4D, we can grab all of our geometry like this. And if it's converted down into geometry, grab it all. And if you choose select all and we do a Control A, we grab all of our scene geometry, you get a little update up here. So this says about 1,000 polygons. This is very safe. It's going to load quickly. In general, you want your assets to be under 10,000 polygons, and then your scenes, if you want it to have the best performance, you want it to be under 50,000 polygons. But I'm pretty happy with this design. It's very simple. And so let's go ahead and display it with our shading, just so we get an idea of what this is going to look like. Pretty cool. Again, I'm just going to save our work. So now that we have a surface modeled, I just want to talk about a few modifiers that might be useful for when you're modeling. So when I'm modeling a ship, one tool I like to use a lot is the loop selection. The shortcut is to hit the letter U, and then gives you all of these different type of modeling tools. And if you hit the shortcut L, it turns on loop selection. And based on the mode that you're selected in, if we hover around here, you can grab a whole loop like this, or you can grab a whole area like this. Just a nice way to grab a loop of your geometry. So what I'm going to do is grab this area right here, and then I'm going to hit the shortcut M to bring up all these mesh options, and you get lots of different tools to modify your geometry. And I'm going to hit the letter T to bring up our extrusion, so we can extrude that geometry up. And I just want to do this to kind of create a nice little lip right around the edge here, just to kind of add more detail while we're here. Next, I'm going to hit U and L to bring up our loop selection. I'm going to go to the outer loop right here. And with this selected, I might make a little more details as well. So we can hit MT to extrude inwards. And this might be a nice spot to add like a loop light. I'll hit the letter T to scale down my selection. There you go. Pretty cool. I don't really like that, so I might scale it back up. The point being is these are just nice modeling shortcuts when you're working in this space. If you want to work quickly, you got to know them. Great. So now that we've kind of modeled, extruded, and done some cuts like this, and our geometry is separated nicely, it's now time for us to jump into the next phase, which is UV unwrapping. I like to explain UV unwrapping as the wrapping paper that you would put around your object. So if I painted this, if I want to start painting this with really cool textures and materials, we could apply materials right here in the Cinema 4D, or you can use external programs, which I might show you briefly, to paint. So in the case that we wanted to paint this externally, I'll just keep saving my work. What we'll do is, you got all your objects here, but we're going to switch to a different layout, and it's called the BP UV editor. Now in Cinema 4D S22, they have a whole new tool set up to do just that, to unwrap your models. So if we grab the tube here, you can see what it currently thinks the unwrap should be. We have the top lights, bottom lights, we have the, the glass on the top, and we have the ship bottom. So this is where it currently thinks the cutouts should be, but you can make your own. So for example, I just want to show you some examples of this. So if we grab the ship body, for example, and go to a cubic unwrap and hit apply, it tries its best to create some automatic seams. And these ones are wonderful for us. This is the two-dimensional representation of the surface of the ship body. And if we switch to the line mode here, you can see where it's going to have our line cuts. I'm actually okay with these ones, but you can make your own lines if you choose. But for me, this is awesome. This works, more than what I need. I'm gonna go to the glass. You can see where it's currently cutting things. I kind of like what it has, except for this top bit. I don't want it to cut the geometry like this. So I'm gonna go to our line cut and maybe just get rid of that UV map. So in this case, I want it to just hopefully paint this really smoothly. And then maybe the only line that I want should be at the top here. So I'll grab this line tool and just draw what's called a seam. And we just kind of connect it down there. And the seam is where it's going to try to cut the geometry. So if I go back to our face selection and grab all the faces, we have all the faces selected and we have a seam now. So if we go back to our faces and do set UV from projection, and go to UV unwrap, it unwraps our geometry. And there's the seam. And what's cool about this is these polygons here correspond to the 2D space. So if I do a loop selection like earlier with the shortcut UL, I could easily paint this structure in another program or in body paint, and we'll be able to texture our entire glass of our structure. So I'm really happy with that unwrap. All right, moving back up, we have the bottom lights. These ones are pretty good as well, but it's got a little strange cutout, so I might want to get rid of its cutout and just create our own. For this one, since the lights aren't going to be that textured or detailed, I'm just going to go right into the object. We've got bottom light selected, and make sure we're on our face selection. I'm going to select all of the faces, set UVs from projection, and try to do an automatic unwrap. So I'll try this angular one, and it does a very good job at cutting out the geometry, and in a way that I'm happy to paint later. I'm going to do the same thing to the top lights. So I'm going to get rid of its automatic unwrap. We'll go up here to the top and do the same idea. We're just going to select everything with Control A and do a set UV from projection. We could do a UV unwrap. There's no seam, so it doesn't know what to unwrap. So I'll just do an automatic unwrap with the new tool. That's perfect. I like it. Easy peasy. Great. Last but not least, we have this tube at the bottom. It has a pretty decent cutout, but what I don't like is how some of these polygons are overlapping on each other. And so to fix that, we're going to get rid of the UV map that it made, and we'll just start again. So I'm going to select all to grab everything in here. Then I'm going to go to my edge selection and just create some areas so that I wouldn't mind it cutting. So I don't mind it cutting that there, and I don't mind it cutting it there. Cool. And then we'll go into set UV from projection and then do a UV unwrap. And this has unwrapped the object in a way that might be friendly to paint later. So again, just to reiterate, you can see how by selecting these areas here, we are selecting the polygons in 3D space. It's just really nice. Only thing I don't like right now is the orientation. It's at an angle. So what I like to do is just grab all of my geometry again and use their new manipulator tool, the UV transform, and just rotate it into the right spot. And that feels great. I'll select it all again, and last but not least, I like to stretch to fit sometimes. So this kind of just separates our geometry a bit and tries to take up more space. It's another way of painting. There's just a lot of different options, what I'm trying to tell you. So let me just do another loop selection here. We get these options to paint all these inner areas. You can paint the bottom or the top. I like it, you know. And if you don't like it, then again, we can just undo our unwraps. There's other algorithms for unwrapping too. We have the packed one, which just tries to make everything as flat as possible. We have the cubic one. But wow, that packed one looks great. I'm gonna see what that looks like. Yeah, I like that one. And I'm not bothered by the seams. Okay, wonderful. So we have our asset modeled and each part of it is unwrapped, which is wonderful. So the next step I like to do is apply some base materials to everything. So I'm gonna go back to my standard view. Again, save our work, so we wanna save as we go, always. So what I do down here in the bottom is create some textures. So I'm just gonna double click in here. Okay, so now we're ready to apply some basic materials. So I like to paint in a program called Substance Painter, and I'm just gonna touch on it very briefly. But to do that, you know, to be safe first, you wanna apply basic colors to each part of your geometry. So you just double click in here and choose a random color. I'm just gonna turn on the color channel, and these colors are not the true color that it's gonna be. These are just for painting purposes. And you can just drag these right onto your model. And we wanna rename these. So I'm gonna call this ship body. Great, I'm gonna double click in here, make a new texture. Same idea, give it a color. I'm just gonna choose a random color here, and we're gonna drag this onto the glass. I'm gonna call this glass. And I might just copy this one, paste it in place. We're gonna give it a different color, purple, and we're gonna rename it to top lights. Apply these to our top lights. And then I'm gonna copy this one as well, paste it in place, make it a nice yellow color, and apply this to the bottom. We'll call these bottom lights. Great, we just got one more to worry about. We're gonna copy it, paste it in place, and this is gonna be for the bottom, and I'm just gonna call this landing. I don't know what to call it actually. I just called it tube. We'll leave it at that. Just a regular old tube. So we'll go ahead and apply that to the tube, and I'm just gonna call this tube bottom. Okay, so these are gonna become the IDs of those UV maps. So each one of these will correspond to these colors. All right, oops, got a weird selection there. Let me try to apply the ship body one more time. There we go. So let's just go ahead and save our project. I'm gonna go to File, Export, Wavefront OBJ. I'm gonna increase this from centimeters to meters and make it a larger object, something like, 12 meters across, and hit OK. And I'm gonna save it in here, UFO for AR, Substance. Save that there. Great, I'm gonna open up Substance Painter and very quickly paint this model. All right, so we are about to record the Substance Painter portion of this AR creation. And the reason why we're recording this on a different day is I made a mistake that is really common to make, and I wanna help you to not make that same mistake. So I wanna show you what the error is and then how to fix it. So we have our model here, and now it's time for us to open up Substance Painter. So I'm gonna launch it here. Okay, here is the problem that you can easily make when painting for augmented reality. When we go up to the file here and choose the new option, there's a couple of different templates here at the top that you can choose from. and I'll show you the one that creates a problem. So if you chose PBR metallic roughness by algorithmic, it sometimes confuses which faces of your model should be shown. And I'll show you what I mean here. So I'm going to select our model. This was the UFO for AR substance that we just modeled a moment ago. And I'm going to just leave everything else unchecked. I might change this to OpenGL. This is just a different type of way of rendering. And we'll hit OK. And take a look at what problem this causes. When I orbit around the model, you can see that we're seeing like the back faces of your model appear through the edges. And while this would totally still work, it might be kind of frustrating to be painting like this, because if I fill up a surface, it's just hard to see what's going on. So this is an error that I made and I was struggling with, and I wanted to show you that and show you the fix for it. So here's how to import your models so that they don't do this out of Cinema 4D when you bring it into Substance Painter. What we're going to do is go to File, New, and we're going to switch the template type from this PBR metallic roughness by algorithmic. We're going to make sure that we include, it's almost the same spelling, it's the same thing, PBR metallic roughness, but what we want is the alpha test by algorithmic. We need that alpha test. And I'm going to select our model again. Same one, UFO AR for substance. And we'll set this to OpenGL. The resolution is the size that the textures are going to be made at, so I encourage you to increase the resolution if you feel it's necessary. But for AR, most programs are going to compress it down to 1024 pixels by 1024, so I like to work in that space. Last thing to note here before we unwrap this, or before we import this, is this thing. If you check on create a texture set per UDIM tile, it's going to merge all of your different textures into one single square. That can be great for file size, but for us, we were good about our file management, and I want to have a separate texture for the glass, a separate texture for the body, a separate texture for the lights, and all this stuff is really nice to have separate so that we can import 5 textures instead of having one. So I'm going to go ahead and uncheck that. So again, we have our material ready, 1024, OpenGL. We hit OK. We're going to discard the one that was here. And now we get this nicer object to paint where we can see the correct faces of it being rendered. So we're inside a Substance Painter, and just a quick note about what's going on here. This is our 3D view of our object, and these are the 2-dimensional views. So in Cinema 4D S22, the reason why we did all that hard work of unwrapping everything was so that we would have these nice surfaces to paint on. So that's the glass. So let's just get right to it. First thing you want to do when you're going to start painting in Substance Painter for AR or for game design for that matter is you want to go into here and choose File. You want to go to Edit, and you want to bake your mesh maps. It's kind of confusing, but all we need to know for now is that baking your mesh maps makes it so that it can remember your curvature, it can take into account the angles better when you're painting. I like to just bake everything in the start, and it's making a nice material for us to paint on. Just refines it a little bit. So let me let it do its thing. It's doing lots of math here. And it looks a little bit nicer to paint, and it knows more stuff about your model. All right, I'm gonna take a quick break to check the streaming service, see if it's still recording. Cool, it is still recording. Okay, so our model is all baked and it's ready to be painted. I'm gonna go right into here, and we got all these different shelves in here of materials. I'm gonna grab a nice iron material here. Let's look for one that looks great, iron brush. I'm gonna apply this to the top. So we get this nice metallic look for the top there. Maybe I'll try a different iron. Oh, that one looks kind of cool. Just kind of playing with different materials here. I like this iron brushed, and we get these nice layers over here. Oops, sorry, I think I'm in the way here. Let me move my cursor up here. So what we got here is our layers, and we can start tweaking we can start tweaking the properties of our layers. So I can go to the material color, for instance, and start playing with the color of this glass. Give it a little bit more saturation, if I'm going for a cartoony look. I'm going to switch to the Smart Materials. and they got lots of great textures in here. But this one's really cool, this steel painted, scraped, and dirty. If I apply that to the body, I mean, it already looks really, really nice and fancy. But I'm just gonna play with different textures in here because we're in Substance Painter, and it's really a good spot to explore your materials. So I'm just trying different materials on here. It's a rusted one, and you see it's applying it as a layer. I can just turn these off or delete them if I don't want them. Just trying to experiment here. That one looks kind of cool. It looks a little too worn down. Maybe I'll just do something with some scratches. There we go, it looks kind of cool. I like these little subtle scratches. I'm going to expand that folder, go into our steel base. We can play with the properties of our materials. There's some dirt on there, so I might want to make the dirt maybe a little bit shinier or rougher. We have a metallic nature that we can add to it, so now it's just a little bit more reflective, which I like. We have the sharpen. This is just sharpening those edges a little bit. We can increase that sharpen or decrease it. I'm going to leave it where it was. We also got this steel base, which looks like it uses some random properties. It's how bright the metal is. Pretty cool, right? Cool. I like this. All right, moving along. So that's what our ship is going to look like. Now we're on the top. This is the lights. I'm going to go ahead and fill in a color from scratch here. Maybe grab a bright color, a bright yellow or something. And yeah, just turn off the other maps that I don't need. We'll just do a regular base color for the lights there. Cool. I'm going to go to the bottom of the ship, and let's see what it would look like with one of these materials. Maybe this gold damaged might look kind of cool there. Maybe. Actually, what would some copper worn down look like on the top there? That's kind of cool. You can just experiment. That's really what it's about. Oh, I like that copper base there. It looks kind of cool. And then, you know, I like to just experiment in here, so I'm just gonna apply some different materials and see what works for me. And at any point, you can do like stacking of different objects and materials on top of each other. So there's like these great chrome finishes if I want it to be super reflective and have my lights all around here. And then we can add a black mask, which allows us to paint on an isolated area. Now for you 2D artists out there, this is what's really nice about using this method of painting, is we can paint on a 2D plane and it transfers to that 3D surface. So if you wanted to paint in here, you got all sorts of brushes in here that you can paint with, but it's just showing you some different ways of working inside of Substance Painter. We can also work procedurally with a generator, and on a generator we can have it apply things to just the UV borders, and this will create a nice little fade to different metals by the edges. It's using these UV borders to dictate where the things should grow from. We have a contrast knob, we have a balance, we have a distance. All pretty cool, right? And a smoothness. I'm just playing with these here. Really just experimenting, looking for something that kind of looks really cool and fancy. Okay, I like that. I like what that's doing. Let me try this fabric. That's interesting too. I kind of like it, maybe not. Let me get rid of that. Try some copper red. Okay. So once you're at a point that you're pretty happy with your substances, again, you can always add more details, go into textures and, you know, apply different alphas or grunges. But I'm pretty happy with this. And I wanted to show you what is the proper way to get these textures out of here, out of Substance Painter, back into Cinema 4D so that we can apply this as an asset that works in augmented reality. So to do that, things to note is we have all these different texture tiles, and each one of these has different properties like a base color, a reflection material, how bright is something, how rough is something. And we can use a really nice export feature in Substance Painter to get that data out. So I'm going to go over here to the file and choose export. Export textures. And once you're here, this part kind of took me a while to understand, so I just want to help summarize it for you. You have to really know what template you want to output from. You could use the PBR metal roughness that we already have, or if you're like me, you want to have it work really well for augmented reality, I recommend using this GLTF PBR metal roughness. It automatically changes the output to the only channels that are most widely accepted for augmented reality programs. And you can see for the bottom material, it's going to export a base color. It's going to export a roughness material as well as a normal bottom and emissive bottom. We also have this glass texture, has 4 different channels, the ship body, 4 different channels, and the top. So all these are going to be exported out. So if we go back to the global settings, I'm going to change the output directory to the folders where I've been saving all my textures. So I'm going to make a new folder in here. We're going to call this latest UFO textures. Okay, I'm going to select that folder, and then we can choose export. And you can watch what it's doing. It's exporting all these different textures, and I have them as PNGs. And we've got a lot of good colors in there, so that's looking great. I'll just show you what the outputs look like here. So in this folder, these are all the outputs that you're going to get. Let me view it extra large. So these are all the outputs. You get base color, you get more base colors, you get some reflections, normal maps, that's how bumpy things are. We got more color. You just get a bunch of different channels. Here's the base color of the tube, and then this is some roughness on the tube as well. So lots of different channels. And now that you have this, you can re-import these back into Cinema 4D and apply them to our material, or we can apply them to our model. So now what we're going to do is jump back into Cinema 4D, and I'm going to switch back to our standard mode here. So this is the same model, but I just have different color textures on here. And what we need to do is replace each of these object materials with the correct channels. So for this glass one, I'm going to double click on it. And a really important property is to set this to white. If you have any color in here, it's going to influence the texture that you put on here. So if you do it white, it's going to use 100% of your texture. So I'm going to go ahead and load an image. And I got Cinema 4D here. These are the latest ones. This one is for the glass. So I just got to look for the right one that is labeled. There it is. There's the glass base color. I'm going to hit open and hit no. There it is. Fun fact, I might encourage you to go to the viewport options for each of your materials, and for the texture preview size, set it to no scaling, and then you get the full quality of that material, so that if you're getting it up close, you can see all the texture that's going to come out of that material. Great. Next, I'm going to go back to that glass option, and we're going to also turn on reflections. And I'm going to delete the reflections that it comes with and just add our own. So we can do a Beckman in here and reduce the strength a little bit, and the reflection strength and the bump strength. And this will just give us some nice, reflective materials to play with. And if we want to get the right bumpiness from our track, we need to upload a texture of that roughness. So I can go into here, go to load images, and I look for the glass ORM texture, or occlusion, roughness, and metallic. So here is that data. I'm going to hit open, and then this kind of adds roughness to our shape really nicely. We can also go to our bump channel, load up an image there, and try to look for the glass bumpiness. Doesn't really have that many bumps, so maybe I'll just use this texture here. And you can increase that strength or decrease it. But now we get these nice little bumps on the surface of our material that you can see here. And that's going to just add to that realism. Great, so that one's great. I'm going to go to the body texture now. And we're going to go to our color and replace it with a different color. So I'm going to look for the ship color. There it is, ship base color, and hit open. Awesome. And again, we have to go to that viewport. I like to turn on my preview to no scaling. That way we can get all those nice little scratches and textures on it. Then we're going to go back into that body and turn on our other channels that are important, like a normal map I think we used in this one. So we can go to load image, look for the ship normal maps, and now we're going to get some nice little bumps. We can go back to the reflection channel, turn that on, and I always like to delete the ones that are here. You can add your own, and I'm just turning down the strength a little bit of everything. I'll keep the bump strength up there. Alright, so we got this really nice thing coming through. Let me get rid of that brightness so that we can see through it a little bit better. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Okay, and so I think you get the idea. You get these textures that you make in Substance Painter, and then you can light your scenes correctly. I'm just going to do the last one here for the bottom, and then we'll just do basic shapes of solid colors for the lights. I won't even use the ones from Substance Painter. So we're going to go to the tube thing and go to our base color. Again, set this to white. Might have to do that for the other ones as well. And there is the copper material. Awesome. Then we're going to go to our normal and load up the copper normal. Looks like there's not really a normal, so maybe we'll leave that out. We'll go straight to the reflection channel and turn these off, the defaults, and add our own. Reduce the strength a little bit. I might roughen the material for that one a tiny bit more. Cool. And I might even just load that texture in for the bumps, just to give it a little bit more character. And we can turn off that viewport to have no scaling, and that way we get these little micro details that can appear in the model. Okay, cool. And then for the lights, I'm just going to swap those out manually with just some solid luminance colors. These will appear as pure colors with no shadows or highlights. So I'll do that to the bottom ones as well, but we'll choose a different luminance. Maybe not that color. Maybe I'll go with the yellow or something, or a blue. Okay, cool. So we got this wonderful model made, and we have it all ready to go. We're at a point now that I would like to show you a really nice tool to preview what is the texture quality going to look like of your model in AR. The tool I use is called Babylon.js. I'm going to open up that browser now. Alright, so this is the tool that I use to preview the texture quality of my augmented reality creations before they're done. What it needs is a .glb or a .gltf file format. So what I'm going to do in Cinema 4D with their new export options, I'm going to go to File, Export, and choose this brand new GLTF or .glb file format. You can keep all this data in here. And I'm just going to put this into a spot, call this Testing Materials 2020, July. Okay, and we'll save this. And what we need to do is just drag that right into the browser. So I'm going to open up the file over here and look up that file format that we just saved and just drag it right in. And this is a wonderful tool for just previewing the texture quality of your graphics. Now you're probably noticing that the graphic here in AR is purple for the whole body. And if you're wondering what that's about, again, I'm so happy that we're seeing this now. Here's what's happening. So in here, it looks like it's just gray for the body. But if we look at the ship body, what I remember doing earlier was the color. We set the color to this purple, and this purple is influencing that material property. I actually like the purple, so I can keep it, but if you didn't want that, you would need to set this to pure white, and then it would listen to 100% of the image quality in here. It would ignore the purple data. But to be honest, I kind of liked the purple data, so I'm actually going to keep it. So I'm just going to set this to a nice subtle purple detail. I like purple. It's good. It's a good color. All right, now we're going to talk about animation for augmented reality. Here's the rule. I'm going to switch it to an animation layout and just tell you the rule. The rule is simple. Right now, we're at the early stages of augmented reality in terms of quality. And so for now, you have to keep your animations kind of tight. I know it's tempting to use all of these amazing deformers that come with Cinema 4D, like the bend and the twist. But the thing is, this language is not shared with everybody. So if you make a twist deformer on your geometry and try to save it out, other AR programs aren't going to recognize that. We have to save everything as geometry at the end of the day, but specifically for animation, it only understands position, scale, and rotation. The big three, PSR. So let's just make some PSR animation on our flying saucer that's loopable. So I'm going to take all of this, right click on it, and group it. And I'll just call this the UFO asset. We're going to grab the UFO asset and make sure that our coordinates are turned on. And we got our keyframes. If I hit play, nothing's happening. There's no animation. So on the starting keyframe, I'm going to set a value in the Y position by clicking on that dot. Then we're going to go to the end here and set a point there. So now we have a start and end, and it's on the same keyframe. And then somewhere in the middle, I'm going to change the value in Y to have it float a little bit. And if we hit spacebar, we can play it. Look at that. We get a nice little levitating UFO. A better way to view what's happening is to switch our animation to the F-curve mode, and to make sure you are selecting your object. So if I grab our object and squeeze it together, I'm using the Alt and right mouse button to squeeze the curves together here so we can see it. This is quite literally what's happening. We see the value going low, going up, and going down. And if you grab these curves, you can change the acceleration. So just to show you, here's what a very quick acceleration would look like. It just switches on and off. If we go like this, it will kind of accelerate in and pop back up and pop back down and pop back up. So if you want a more cartoony feel, you can do that. I like to just grab these curves and kind of just exaggerate their structure. So this one accelerates up and eases in, accelerates up, eases in. I'm just going to add a little bit more value to that curve there. Great. So we got a little upwards motion on the Y value. I also want to have this spinning like a flying saucer in my mind. So that's going to be along this H value. And I can click on here to slide the value. I'm going to set a keyframe on frame 0. And then I'm going to go to frame 90 and set the value to 360 degrees, which is a full revolution. Now when we hit spacebar, we get a nice spin. And yeah, it accelerates and it slows down. Now for me, I don't really want to see the acceleration of the spin. I want it to actually be spinning the whole time. So to do that, we're going to expand out our value and bring up our rotation value. And if we see right now, there's a nice little curve in this value, which means it's an acceleration change. But since I want this to be a constant speed, I'm going to select both these keyframes and then just easily click on the linear button. And this turns it into a flat line, which means that it's going to be spinning at a constant speed now. It doesn't look like it's starting and stopping, because I want this to work in augmented reality. I want it to just be a constantly spinning, looping asset. Great. We got that animated. I'm going to add a few more values in here, so we'll just quickly go to our other rotations. Maybe I want to add a little bit of wobble. So we'll go to maybe frame 20, set a keyframe at 0, and we'll go to frame 73, set a keyframe to 0, and then somewhere in the middle I might exaggerate maybe 4 degrees, 5 degrees here, and then somewhere here I might exaggerate the other way, 6 degrees there. And now we get this nice little wobble that's also going to happen as our object moves up and down, which is great. Again, let's save our work. And that's cool. We got this nice animating asset. And you can see that wobble happening. Looks really cool. All right, so we're done with our animation. Pretty simple for now. And so now we're going to talk about how do you get this out of Cinema 4D into a format that is friendly for augmented reality everywhere. And here we go. What I like to do is just make sure I have my asset selected, just to have it. Don't have to do it. And we go up to the File option, and you're going to choose Export. And the formats that you want to focus on are this. So if you want a still object that's not moving at all, you're going to do a wavefront, OBJ, or .obj format. It's just a solid object. It will be textured, but it won't have any of your animation. If we do a FBX file, this one's really good for augmented reality. It stores animation data, texture data, and geometry, so it's wonderful. But it's a little bit older. So the one I'm recommending now is brand new to Cinema 4D. It's a new export option, and it's the .gltf or the .glb format. This is a great, my preferred format for augmented reality. So I'm going to choose the gltf exporter and hit OK. And I'm just going to save it right into my format here. I'm going to call this finished asset and hit save. And now that that's done, I use a tool to test out my augmented reality animations and assets before I bring them into augmented reality. And I'll show you that now. So I have a new browser up here, and the service I use is this one. It's called sandbox.babylonjs.com. And it's a browser that you just drag a format into here. So I'm going to go to my objects and my UFO object. And what you do is just drag your asset right into the browser, and it plays back inside of augmented reality. And look at that. This tells us what it's going to look like in augmented reality before we commit to bring it in AR. Notice how I got this purple tint. That has to do with the color I chose inside of Cinema 4D, just to point it out for you. So it doesn't look like that here. So if we switch this back to standard, just wanted to point that out because this happened to me before and I was confused. When I went to the body color, everything looks like it's gray, but notice how the color, I chose this pink, and so it's actually mixing this value with my color texture. If we wanted that to go away, you would just make it a solid white color, and then it would take whatever value is in here at 100%. But to be honest, I'm not against the pink color here. I actually kind of like it. And we got all the other things, got little scratches in there from substance. So cool. The very final step is bringing this into AR because I am approving of this asset. I want to see this work in augmented reality. So I'm going to switch the video to the footage that I filmed with this asset. I use a tool called Adobe Aero to preview my augmented reality assets. All right, so I'm going to drag our finished asset into my Adobe Aero account in Creative Cloud. And now I can just jump onto my device here. So I'm going to jump into the Adobe Aero app and click on Create New. And it asks you to scan your environment. So I'm just scanning. Let me just scan right here. I'm just going to scan my environment here. Tap to set the ground plane. I'm going to click on the plus sign in the lower left corner and then click on Creative Cloud. And I'm going to go to Aero and go to my Cinema 4D test. And here is our UFO for AR finished asset. And again, it's the .glb format. We tap on it, we hit open. I'm going to tap to place it somewhere. And now we can actually see it inside of augmented reality, which is pretty amazing. We can raise it up with 3 fingers. I can pinch it up and down with my other 2 fingers. If I hit preview, I can literally orbit around it. But you're probably wondering, where is the animation? So what I do is I go into the object, I tap on it, I go to behaviors, I hit the trigger button, and I go to let's do a tap trigger. And on tap, I want an action to happen. I want to play my animation that we saved out in that format earlier. And I'm gonna have it play it infinitely. And that looks good to me. I'm gonna hit the check mark. And now when I hit preview, all I have to do is tap it, which is what I'll do right now. And look at that, it's got all of that animation that we just made inside of Cinema 4D, and it's all working in real time inside of Adobe Aero to preview. And thank you so much for watching. That was my Cinema 4D pipeline for creating assets that work in augmented reality. Hopefully you learned a lot about texturing and modeling and preparing your assets, and hopefully you remember to stay conscious of PSR and saving your data in a nice format like a GLTF or a .glb. My name was Don Allen III. You can find me on Instagram at Don Allen III. Thank you so much for watching, and that's my time.